Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my channel if you're new. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. In today's video, we are going to talk about the form I-134A, which is an affidavit of support for people who are looking to be admitted to the United States on the basis of humanitarian parole. Specifically, this form applies to people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Ukraine. If you have a loved one or a friend from one of these countries who is seeking admission to the United States based on these humanitarian reasons, this would be the first step in the entire process for you. I just wanted to quickly say that prior to January 6th of 2023, the process looked a little bit different. The process has changed, and now in order for you to help out anybody from these countries to come to the US, the first step in the entire process will be filing form I-134A. If you are still not sure about the steps involved in this process, you can go to uscis.gov, and right on the first page you will see these two sections. One is dedicated to nationals of these countries, and then the other is dedicated to nationals of Ukraine. However, the process for nationals of these countries is similar. You can click Learn More right here under one of these sections. It will take you to a page that will explain how the process would work. So if you scroll a little bit down here, you will see this section right here that says Process Steps. If you click on it, it will explain exactly what steps need to be taken in order for the person to come to the US. So the first step in the entire process is to have a supporter in the United States file the form I-130A, and this form I-134A must be filed online, and it is for the following nationals. Once this form is approved, USCIS will then email the beneficiary. So the beneficiary is the person outside of the United States seeking admission to the US. So the beneficiary will receive an email with further instructions. One of them will be creating an online USCIS account, confirming additional details, submitting some additional paperwork, and then completing additional forms and applications through Customs and Border Patrol. And after that, once everything is approved, the person will receive authorization to travel, and they will have about 90 days to enter the United States. Once they do, they will be inspected at a U.S. port of entry. There will be additional things done during this inspection, such as collecting fingerprints, additional questions, make sure that the person coming into the United States is safe. Once parole is granted, the person will be able to remain in the United States for up to 2 years. They will be eligible to file for employment authorization and work in the United States, and then continue their journey, if possible, applying for any kind of additional visas that may be applicable to them, such as, for instance, if they are eligible to apply for TPS or asylum, or if they have a relative in the United States who can petition for them. So something like this. If we go back to the home page and we learn more about the Uniting for Ukraine process steps, if you scroll a little bit down and click how to be considered for parole under Uniting for Ukraine, it will tell you that all the same steps are basically involved. A supporter must first file I-134A, and then the beneficiary will receive an email with additional steps. So if you click here, what to expect after the form is filed, it will tell you all of the additional things that will need to be done. Let's get started with the form itself. If you are a supporter, first step is for you to create an online account with USCIS. As you can see on the top right corner, you can click this sign in button, and you can either sign in if you already have an existing account, or you can create an account. So I will sign in using the account that I already have. Once you log into your account, in order to file the form I-134A, you will have to click this button here, file a form online. Next, you will need to select the form that you are filing. We are selecting I-134A. Please carefully read everything that is written on this page. This first page specifically tells us that this online application I-134A is only available for nationals of the following countries. If you are a supporter, you must be located in the United States. You must also file a separate form for each beneficiary you're planning to support, including minor children. If, for example, you have a brother or sister that you're bringing from one of these countries, and they have minor children or spouses, you will have to file a separate I-134A form for each of those applicants because each of them are seeking separate admission to the United States. So let's get started. Again, read carefully all of the things that are listed on this page. Please read carefully the disclaimers. The next section tells us about the fee. There currently is no fee for this form. Next, it tells you some documents that you may need in order to complete and submit this form. There is always a statement about biometrics, so this does not necessarily mean that you will be asked to do biometrics. However, it states that you may be asked, meaning that it is a possibility for some people if necessary. And then it tells you what are some of the things to expect after you submit your declaration. This form does not have to be completed in one sitting. USCIS will hold your form on your online account for 30 days. If you keep logging in and making additional changes to the form, then the timer will reset, so you will have sufficient time to complete this form. It automatically saves as you fill it out, so you can come back to it at any time. First and foremost, the first page asks us on whose behalf we are filing this form. So the basis for filing, we have to click another individual who's the beneficiary. Next, it asks us to select who we're filing this form for. And let's say, for instance, we are filing for somebody from Ukraine. Next, is someone assisting you with this form? Typically, we would say no, unless there's somebody sitting next to you helping you fill out the form. Now we are moving on to the information about the individual who is agreeing to financially support the beneficiary. So as a supporter, this section is all about you. On the left-hand side, you will be able to track where exactly in the form you are. So this is currently where we are. So provide your current legal name. Next, have you ever used any other name since birth? You can either say yes or no. Provide the name of organization or group that is providing support to the beneficiary with you. This is optional. If you are doing it on your own, you don't have to put anything here. If there is an organization like a church or some kind of group that's helping you out or some kind of firm, then you can put their name in here. However, if you're just doing it on your own for your relative or your friend, you don't have to say anything. Next, provide your phone number. Next, you can select if your mobile telephone number is the same as your daytime number. We can say yes, and provide our email. Next, provide your current mailing address. So this first line here is in care of name. So if somebody else is receiving mail on your behalf, then you can list their name here. However, if you are living at your mailing address, you're the only person receiving mail, then you can just leave this first line blank and provide your address below. Next, select if your mailing address is the same as your physical address. For most people, the answer will be yes. However, if your mailing address that you provided here is, for example, a P.O. box, but you live at a different address, then you will say no and provide your actual physical address below. However, we will just say yes, we live and receive mail at the same address. Next, provide your date of birth, provide your city or town of birth, state and country of birth. Select your sex, male, female, or unspecified or another gender identity. Please keep in mind that you must select whatever sex is listed on your identification documents, not the sex that you prefer to be identified as. Next, provide your current immigration status. For instance, we'll just say that we are a U.S. citizen. However, what's interesting about this particular form is that you do not have to be a citizen or a permanent resident in order to be a supporter for somebody. You can be a non-immigrant holding a legal status in the United States. For example, you can be here on a valid visa, any other type of visa, such as employment visa or tourist visa. However, please keep in mind that if you are not a U.S. citizen, U.S. national, or a permanent resident, the chances of this form getting denied are a lot harder if you are a non-immigrant, because the U.S. government and the immigration, they want to assure that you as a supporter can take care of the persons coming to the United States seeking for humanitarian parole. And if you are in a non-immigrant status that is due to expire relatively soon, you may not be a good candidate to support these people. Next, please provide your A number if you have one. If you do not have one, click this box. An A number is your alien number that typically looks something like this. And if you are a naturalized citizen, you will be able to find this number on your naturalization certificate. If you are a green card holder, you will also be able to find this number on your actual physical green card. If you are born in the United States, you do not have an A number. Provide your social security number. Next, provide your USCIS online account number. So typically you will only have an online account number if you have ever previously filed any forms online using your USCIS account number. If you have never filed forms online, you will not have an online account number. So you can simply say, I do not have a USCIS online account number. If you had an online account number, typically you would be able to see it somewhere on your account when you log in. And finally, you will need to select on this page your relationship to the beneficiary. And that is an important point that I also wanted to make. USCIS will, in fact, analyze your relationship to the beneficiary, to the person coming to the United States. They will look at the nature of your relationship as one of the factors in determining how good of a supporter you might be. They want to make sure that the person who is coming to the United States from a very vulnerable situation is not being taken advantage of. Or that the person who is the supporter is not being taken advantage of. So you should know that USCIS will definitely use your relationship to the beneficiary as one of the factors in deciding whether or not to approve this application. So here, as you can see, there is a lot of different relationships that you can choose in how you relate to the person. Let's, for instance, say that we are supporting our sibling. Next, please provide your employment status, so you can say that you are employed, unemployed, retired, or other. And again, if you are the supporter that is employed, whether full-time, part-time, or self-employed, is a favorable factor. If you are selecting unemployed or retired, these factors may be treated as unfavorable in your situation unless you are able to provide sufficient evidence of perhaps assets or significant savings. However, the best option to be a supporter in this case is obviously to be employed. Next, please provide the type of employment you hold. Let's say we are employed. So once you provide the address of your employer, you can click Next. Now that we have completed the first part of the application, we're moving on to the second part, which is asking about the financial information of the supporter. Here, you will be asked to provide information about yourself, so the supporter, and all of your dependents or any other individuals you financially support. And it is important that here you do not include the beneficiary or anybody from that section. So here you will simply list yourself, any family members you have, and if you have any other dependents, you will also list them here. First and foremost, we're going to list ourselves, the supporter, provide your full name once again, your date of birth, and the relationship of this person that we just typed in to the supporter. So if you are writing yourself as the first member, which you should, you will select this box. I'm entering my own financial information. And next, you will have to list how much income will you contribute to the beneficiary annually. So here you can type in your income, either the entirety of your income or part of your income that you're willing to contribute to the beneficiary. You can choose to include either the entirety of your income or part of it. However, please make sure that if you are typing in part of your income, that you want to make sure that it is enough to sponsor the beneficiary based on the poverty guidelines. So for instance, Anna is employed by the school district and she makes about $50,000. And we could say that she's going to make about $30,000 available to the beneficiary. And we can save entry. Next, we can add anybody else that is in this family. So let's, for instance, say that Anna is also married. So we're going to click Add Entry. We're going to add Anna's spouse, his birthday, and the relationship to the supporter. So we will just say spouse. Next, you will just have to write in how much income will this individual contribute to the beneficiary. You can either select 0 if you feel like the supporter's income alone should be enough, or you can add part or entirety of this person's income. So let's, for instance, say that Anna's spouse, Andrew, will also contribute about $10,000. Save entry. And let's say that Anna and Andrew also have a child that lives in their household, so we will add a child as well. Next, select the relationship of this child to the supporter. So we could just say, for example, child. And how much income will this individual contribute? Since it is a minor child, we will just say 0. Save entry. So now, as you can see, everybody that is listed in Anna's, the supporter, her household, should be listed here. And if she had any other dependents, for example, on tax returns, she would have to include them here as well. Next, you will have to write in the total number of dependents. So for Anna, she is the supporter, so she doesn't count as a dependent. So she has 2 dependents, Andrew and baby. And next, what is the total income that comes out of all of this? It should be whatever incomes you decided to contribute. In our case, it is about $40,000. We're going to click next. Next, these 2 questions will ask you whether some or any of this income comes from an illegal activity or source. If you are selecting yes to this question, it is very likely that you will not be considered as a suitable supporter for this case. And the second question asks if any of that income that we listed on the previous page comes from means-tested public benefits. And in this particular case, I know that there has been a lot of definitions in terms of which public benefits count. It is asking about income coming from any type of means-tested public benefits, even if it includes Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, anything like that. If any of this income does come from these public benefits, you will have to type in the amount that does. And so that amount will be subtracted from the total income you have made available to the beneficiary. However, If you do not receive any public benefits, you can just say no and proceed to the next section. This next section focuses specifically on how you will be responsible for supporting the beneficiaries who come to the U.S. I have seen videos where people go into a lot of detail on how exactly they will be supporting the beneficiary, and the choice is definitely yours. However, from the standpoint of immigration and considering how any information that you ever provide to the government can potentially be used against you in the court of law, some may say that it might be better to be relatively vague in these sections. Now, again, this is not legal advice in any sense, however, something that you should be aware of. The first statement says that we are responsible for receiving, maintaining, and supporting the beneficiary during their stay in the U.S. Describe the resources you plan to use for the beneficiary. So we can say something, for instance, like housing, groceries, utilities, transportation, and spending expenses as needed. If you would like to go in more detail in this section, you certainly can. Next, this statement says that you are responsible for ensuring that the beneficiary has appropriate housing. So describe how you will help the beneficiary with housing. So in this section, you can say something along the lines of beneficiary will stay with the supporter as needed. The supporter will assist the beneficiary in finding rental housing if needed. And finally, you are responsible to assist the beneficiary in finding services, benefits, employment opportunities, schooling. So here you can describe some of the plans that you can take in helping the beneficiary with these. So for instance, we can write something along the lines of the supporter will help beneficiary in finding and applying for jobs, benefits, and schooling if needed, and supporter will assist beneficiary in completing paperwork, applications, and translations if needed. So in this section, you can be both somewhat specific or somewhat vague. It is up to you, but keep in mind that if USCIS does not like any of these answers, they can always request additional evidence from you. After we answered these questions to your best ability, you can click Next. And here you will be asked to provide any assets that you would like to be made available during your supporting period. Some of the assets that can be used in this part are things like your checking and savings accounts. Any additional assets can include your house, maybe vehicles if you have more than one. However, you should know that your income will be weighed more heavily than the availability of assets. And in addition, if you have sufficient income to support the beneficiary, then assets are supplemental. If you feel like your income does not meet the requirements, then you can either request to have an additional sponsor who will bear the entirety of financial responsibilities for the beneficiary. And another thing you need to consider before you write in your assets, you will need to provide evidence of these assets. When it comes to evidence of things like checking and savings accounts, you will need to provide bank statements of those checking and savings accounts demonstrating that amount. However, if you are trying to use assets such as the value of your house or vehicle or any other maybe real estate that you may have, that you will need to obtain an appraisal document for these. You will need to provide mortgage statements and everything like that. So again, it is up to you whether you can obtain this kind of evidence, whether or not you want to use it. But before you do, just consider some of the things that you will need to provide in order to prove these assets. So for instance, we can say that Anna will use part of her savings to support the beneficiary. We can say, for instance, that it is her checking account and the cash value of that checking account in US dollars. We could say, for instance, she has about $20,000 in savings, and we can use that. And then if we want, we can also include Anna's husband as well, if he has any additional assets or savings. But in our case, we choose not to do that. And so the total dollar amount, we can say $20,000. And again, these are just examples. You want to be as specific as possible and provide as exact of an amount as possible. The next question asks if we have ever filed a form I-134 or I-134A for anybody else. You can either answer yes or no. Obviously, if you answer no, if you've never sponsored anybody before using this form. But for example, if we say that Anna's husband actually immigrated to the United States on a fiancé visa and she sponsored him before using the form I-134, then we'll just say yes, and we'll need to potentially provide additional proof of that. However, we can also just say no and proceed to the next section. Now, finally, we are moving on to the third part of this application, which asks about the beneficiary. So the person who is coming to the United States, first provide their name, then provide if they have ever used any other names before, yes or no. Provide the phone number. So this one will allow you to type in the foreign phone number for the beneficiary. And you can select whether or not this is the same number as the mobile phone number, and the email address of the beneficiary. And this is extremely important. It is very crucial that you provide a valid email address for the beneficiary, because the next steps after the approval of this form will be emailed to the person. So you want to make sure that they will definitely receive this email. Okay. Next, provide the beneficiary's current mailing address. So let's say, for instance, that Jane has escaped Ukraine and went to a different country. For example, she is currently residing or located temporarily in Germany. So we could just select where they are currently located. So for instance, we'll just provide that address and then also specify whether or not the mailing address of the beneficiary is the same as where they are residing now. So we'll just say yes. Next, provide the beneficiary's date of birth, where they were born, state, province, and country. Okay, moving on. Next, select the beneficiary's sex. And again, you want to select whatever is indicated on their government-issued identity document and their current marital status. Next, provide country of citizenship of the beneficiary. Next, provide the country of issuance of the passport and the passport number. Next, provide the expiration date of said passport, and then provide the A number of the beneficiary. Most of the time, beneficiaries will not have an A number. You only receive an A number if you have ever applied for immigration in the past. And this final question on this page asks about the anticipated period of stay in the US. So you can estimate when approximately this person will arrive to the US, and considering the processing times, you want to just put an estimate date. And because we are submitting this application for humanitarian reasons, right, we can just say no end date because we do not know a specific end date of their authorized stay. So we can click next. Here, you will need to provide information about the beneficiary and their income and the income of any dependents that they may have. So first, you will list the beneficiary themselves. So add entry, type in the name of the beneficiary, their date of birth again, their relationship to the beneficiary. So here, because the person we listed is Jane Doe herself, we do not have to select what the relationship is. And finally, how much income will this individual contribute? Now, in most cases, the income will probably be zero, especially because the person probably is not currently employed, and because they're not located in the US, they do not have any income from the United States either. If you believe that beneficiary has a job that still brings them an income, maybe it's some kind of international job or company, then you can certainly try to include that income here. However, For the most part, you probably will have to write 0. Next, we can add another entry. Say, for instance, that Jane also has a child. So type in the name of the child, their date of birth, and how they are related to the beneficiary. We can just say child, for instance, and how much income they will contribute. The answer will most likely be 0. So next here, we want to list the beneficiary's total number of dependents. In our case, not counting Jane herself, we only have 1 dependent. Finally, you want to answer how much will the beneficiary's dependents contribute to the beneficiary annually, and in this case, it probably will be 0 because her child cannot contribute. Next, these 2 questions are similar to what we answered earlier, and that is any of this income obtained illegally? So we'll probably would just say no, and if any of this income comes from mean-tested public benefits, specifically meaning US-based public benefits, probably will be no. Finally, here we will need to provide any assets available to the beneficiary. So in this case, we may choose to add if, for example, Jane Doe has any savings that she's bringing with her, we can definitely list them here. And when it comes to beneficiaries' assets, again, please keep in mind that that is something that will be easily able to be converted to cash within 12 months. So if the beneficiary, for instance, if they have assets located in their home country and those assets may have been abandoned or not necessarily been able to be recovered, then it's probably not a good idea to list them. And in addition to that, you will also have to provide the appraised value of these assets. So that is something to consider before you type in anything and everything here. However, if, for instance, the beneficiary has an access to a bank account still and can use those funds, then obviously we can add them here. So, for instance, we can just say add entry, type in the person's name. So Jane is our beneficiary. What type of asset it is, we can just say, for instance, it is her checking bank account, and type in how much money she has available. We could just say she has about $1,000 available to her. So we'll save entry. And if there is any additional beneficiaries, say for instance, if Jane had a spouse that is also immigrating at the same time, then we might add him here. But if there's no other assets available, we don't have to write anything here. And the total amount in US dollars, we'll just write whatever the amount was that we listed here. Finally, we are at the section of evidence, and this is the most important part of the entire application. You want to make sure that you are providing sufficient evidence so that your application is processed quickly and there are no additional requests. So the first part of the evidence asks about a bank officer statement. So this is a bank statement that you want to provide as proof of both your income and your assets. So here it gives you a short guide on what the statement is supposed to look like. Choose and upload files here. Next part of evidence is asking for employer statement. So this is a statement that you should obtain from your employer, which will state the date and nature of your employment, how much salary you have received, and type of employment. If it's a permanent position, it's a temporary position, any other additional statements that you may want to include, such as maybe the statement will include how much you make per hour. And again, you will upload it here. The best file format for these evidences is PDF. Next, here you will upload your income tax returns. You only need to upload the most recent income tax return, and you can easily obtain a copy of your tax transcript on irs.gov. Here you are asked to provide if you have any bonds, and in this case this evidence is optional. You do not have to provide it if you do not own any bonds. Next, you will need to provide proof of your immigration status. So here you will submit either a copy of your birth certificate, naturalization, certificate of citizenship, anything like that that will show your proof of being a US citizen. If you're a permanent resident, you will need to provide a photocopy of both sides of your green card or a photocopy of your I-551 stamp. If you are located in the United States on a non-immigrant status, like we discussed earlier, maybe an employment visa, then in this case, you will need to provide a copy of your visa and also upload a copy of your I-94. And you can upload several files here. Next, you will need to provide proof of assets. So this first part is asking for proof of assets from the supporter. So in this particular case, you will need to upload proof of your assets, such as if you listed, for example, your checking or savings account, then you will have to include proof of it here, such as 12 months of bank statements, for example, that you have owned these assets. If you choose to include things like your home asset or maybe a value of your second vehicle, in this case, please refer to these particular instructions which describe what exactly they are looking for as proof of these assets. But hopefully you will not need to provide this particular evidence. And finally, if the beneficiary has any assets like we listed earlier, for instance, checking and savings account, then here we will need to upload a bank statement. Once all the evidence is submitted, it takes you to an additional information page. If you feel like there's any additional information that you would like to clarify on the form that you didn't have a chance to clarify, you can add it here. You will just have to specify what exactly you are trying to clarify. For example, you're trying to clarify something about the beneficiary's financial information. Maybe you want to clarify something about the beneficiary's income, and you could say, for instance, it's referring to how much income the beneficiary make, and here you can clarify, for instance, maybe the beneficiary is employed overseas, or maybe they have an international contract or something like that, that this income may be available to them, or maybe it's a residual income that they're getting or something like that. So you can try to specify it here. However, if you do not have any additional information to provide, you can simply skip this page. Click next, and here you will be asked to review your form once again. The fee for this form is 0, which is good. Here they will also list if there's any information that you have missed in the form or didn't fill in. They will direct you to that particular part of the form. However, in our case, we filled out everything that we were supposed to fill out. Here, you will be given an opportunity to review your form, and I highly recommend that you click this button right here that says View Draft Snapshot. It will automatically download the form copy for you, and you should definitely keep this for your own records. So definitely save this form. You cannot use this as a paper form to submit on your behalf, but it's definitely something you should keep for your records. Again, all of this information is listed here. Please review it carefully. After we reviewed the form, we can click next. And here is the signature part of the form. So here you will just say, as the person agreeing to financially support somebody, I can read and understand English. I have read and understood every question. We can click next. And here is where please review all the important information of the USCIS policy. Please review that you are certifying that you have provided all the information to your best behalf, that you provided information truthfully. You can click I have read and agree to the statement. And here you will type in your full name. And this will be considered your electronic signature. After this, you can click next, and it will take you to the final page, which will direct you to submit the form I-134A. Obviously, I'm not going to do that because this is a fake form, but this is the last step. So before you submit the form, please make sure that you go through all of these sections on the left-hand side. Make sure once again that all of the information was provided correctly, especially in this portion where it asks for evidence. Do not rush this form. Again, you have plenty of time to fill it out. Take the time to obtain all of the necessary evidence, especially evidence of your employment and your tax returns, which are absolutely required in this case. I hope that you found this video useful. I wish you luck in the process. Let me know down below if you have any questions. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That way we can help more people. Give this video a like so it is suggested to more people. And I hope to see you guys in my next videos. Bye.